chairperson of Droga5 in Sydney. And David is going to share some learnings with us about working in our creative industry. David.
Am I on? Chairperson. I've never been called chairperson before. It's very PC. How good was Chris's stuff before? Oh! He struggled because I saw him at breakfast. He was all hungover. He had terrible. I was thinking, great, I'm coming after him. And then he's really screwed me. In fact, I was just talking to him that I'm actually going to ask him to come over to Sydney and design our box. So there you go, he's got a job out of it. And it's funny, I was talking to him about, because I think one of the things that's really nice about his work is you know, everything's around stories. You know, it's actually, there's an amazing design and he's very self-deprecating, but there's really strong stories in the middle of it. And I was saying to him that we started Droga5 in Sydney about 4.5 years ago. And one of the things I've learned by talking to lots of people about, you know, the new business and presentations, the first thing I should do is explain why it's called Droga5, because I think everyone ignores me until I say that. They just go, what's it called Droga5? So David Droga, you probably haven't heard of him. He's the fifth brother. There's 6 kids in his family. He's the 5th brother. And his mum, when they were at school, couldn't be bothered writing the names of all of them in the back of all of their school kit. So they're known as Droga 1 and 2, like the Thunderbirds. And it's true. And when he told me, I thought, it's a little too clever. But I have actually met them, and they are like the Thunderbirds. They introduce themselves like that. Anyway, so I was actually at our New York office about a month ago, and I was thinking about this. What am I going to talk about the Loerie? It's hard because you know so much stuff is out there now, you know, and you know, I mean, it's great when you can, you know, for me, these things are trying to share something that's new. So I was trying to think what I'm going to do, and I was a bit sort of stuck, and then a film came on this horrible long flight that I was stuck on, and it gave me some inspiration. So hopefully this will come.
I had so much to say and all to listen. With so many clients, we had forgotten what was important. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'm not even a writer. I was remembering even the words of the original sports agent, my mentor, the late great Dickie Fox, who said, "The key to this business is personal relationships." Suddenly it was all pretty clear. The answer was fewer clients. Less money. More attention, caring for ourselves, games too, just starting our lives with.
Yeah. So I guess most people have seen that film, Joe McGuire. And look, it's famous for, you know, mad Scientology and all the rest of it. But the beginning of that film is actually quite interesting because it sort of starts with this character that he plays having this epiphany. And if you haven't seen the film, he's a sports agent. And one day he just goes, he sort of starts questioning like the fundamentals of the business they're in, the way they work, and you know, I guess sort of thinking about the elephant in the room. And he writes this kind of this I don't know, this thought book on the way we should work and all the things that we talk about in the dark and we don't talk about in rooms like this. And then he gets fired, and then he gets married and blah blah blah. But ultimately, I guess what he's talking about is the fundamentals of the business he's in. And I just thought it'd be interesting, instead of talking about the stuff that we often talk about, is actually to talk about the stuff that we talk about in small rooms. I mean, I've been judging with some really interesting people all week. And, you know, the truth is, there's the work, and then you go off and you have a drink, and then you talk about other stuff, and it's not in the work, it's kind of a bit more interesting. So, I thought I would talk today about the ugly truth. And I guess the things that to me are really, really important about the business, but they're also the things that it's kind of convenient not to talk about. So the first one is about clients. And look, I know this is staggering, but got to start with a revelation. But not all clients want great work, and the reason I put a little asterisk on that is because it's not even as simple as that. You've got to define what great work is, you've got to define what that's about. But there is this kind of weird kind of arrogance in our business that we just go, let's just do this kind of work and they'll buy it. It's like sort of setting an amazing high-class French restaurant up on the wrong side of town and just going, it'll work, trust me. It's funny, I was playing around on the Google sphere, and I just keyed in shit client, and this came up.
Contractor Tips for Contractors by Greg Vandenberg. If you're interested in removing some of the frustration from your business as a contractor, you can also apply this to other businesses as well. You've got to get rid of the cheap skates. You've got to get rid of these people that are shopping for the lowest bid. They're rarely going to be satisfied with your work. They're always going to be asking for more, sometimes demanding more. Now, this just adds to more problems in the future. So could you imagine working for someone who you were going to go over their house and put a new roof on, and pretty soon they're telling you that you broke a board. This light's not working. It worked before, even though it didn't.
Surprising we don't see more people on TV. He's got such natural presence. But it's interesting because, he's talking about something that's completely, it's not our industry, he's talking about building houses, but I think we can all kind of connect with what he's saying. And going back to that asterisk, I think a lot of clients aren't in the business of buying what we as creatives would call great work, and great work, I'll talk a bit more about what that can mean. For a few reasons, and they're not because clients are stupid, not because clients, just don't know what they're doing. I think they're for some very practical reasons. One is that work is a lot more complicated now. Good work, really, really interesting work. It's one of the things I was talking to with some of the judges the other day. The problem with award shows is ultimately it's all about simplification. It's about me looking at something for 10 seconds and having a reaction and moving on. And the really interesting work that's happening, which is changing behaviour and is kind of reinventing stuff and just making everyone behave differently, has got thousands of moving parts. It's really difficult to do. It requires, in my experience, it requires more than one company. A big part of what we do at Droga5 is collaboration. I was just talking with Chris before about this. We're an independent company. One of the really cool things about being an independent company is you chat to people like Chris and go, why don't you come and sing points and make some stuff? It's complicated, but for me in a really cool way. The problem with that is that stuff takes a long time to happen. And often it takes a long time to see the worth of it. I had Toyota as a client for years, and it's interesting. Toyota actually, I don't know if any of you work on Toyota, but they actually have a guiding cultural philosophy called Kaizen. And part of that is about rotating their senior executives. So the way that they form sort of super executives is, you're working marketing for a little time, and then they'll put you in sales, and then they'll put you somewhere else. And that's all great, and that creates really rounded executives at their end. But it's really, really hard if you're trying to sell an idea which is going to change the way that kids drive, and it has to work with the biggest insurance companies in Australia, and and it's going to take a year to just get the legals worked out, and it's going to take another year to land it. And then you're maybe not going to see the results of it for 3 years. Once that's through, it may change the way that young people look at Toyota and look at driving. But the problem is, none of the people that you're talking to will be there in a year or 2 years. And, this is my first time in South Africa, which is crazy because I should have come here a long time ago. I've worked with a lot of really cool South Africans. I wanted to come here for a while. I'm not sure if it's the same, but in Sydney, the turnover of clients is just crazy. Either they're moving on, or they're moving up, or they're moving from CMOs to MDs to, or going regional. And again, going back to great work, it's very difficult for them to own any of that stuff. And at the end of the day, we're in this business for money. I mean, if we're not in this business for money, we should all be artists. And if they're incentivized because, you know, they need to hit a mark in 6 months' time, then your amazing concept, which is going to change their entire business in 3 years, doesn't make sense to me. The other thing, and again, this is just being candid, you know, when people talk about great work, if you haven't done great work, it's very difficult to understand it. It's kind of this ethereal, you know, concept. You know, we talk about great work like it's this tangible thing. I mean, great work is a moving target. The stuff that was great last year might not be great this year. But one of the things about anyone that's worked on work that really has created change, and I don't care if it's won an award or not, but it's significant, is I guarantee it was painful. I guarantee you there was huge amounts of drama. I guarantee you there was argument and craziness. And you know, the thing about when you work on great work is no one remembers that, because then when it actually happens, then everyone conveniently goes, "No, we were a great team." You know, in reality, we're killing each other. But you know, if you've been through that, then the next time that kind of work comes across, you kind of get it more. You go, "Look, I know it's meant to hurt. You know, I did that thing last year, and that was really painful, and we almost lost a client, and this and that, but then it happened, and it was worth it." And it's almost like a muscle. You know, it's like if you're a bodybuilder, you're constantly tearing the muscle, and it gets stronger. To me, that's a little bit like the creative process. And the problem is, there's a lot of clients, certainly in Australia, that represent great brands. They represent brands that globally have done some of the best work in the world, but those people aren't necessarily at the top of their game, and they haven't done that, they haven't been through that pain. So again, you know, when they conceptually, you know, you're doing a pitch, they say, "We want innovation, we want great work." Once they get it, they just break. And it hurts, and they go, "I don't want it to hurt," and, you know, that's a problem. And then I guess the last thing, which is, you know, in terms of why clients don't always jump up as high as we do when we present them with something that's never been done before, is a lot of clients are actually in the business of maintenance. You know, I mean, there's this, in the creative business, we're always about moving forward. We're always about breaking stuff and reinventing stuff. But I think it's a little bit like politics. I mean, you know, you have wartime generals and you have peacetime generals. And I think you have wartime clients and peacetime clients. You have clients who really, if they're honest, and it's hard for them, I think, sometimes to be honest in a room like this with great people, they're in the business of maintenance. They're in the business of keeping the peace. They're not in the business of fighting the war. You know, it's the difference between Churchill and Chamberlain. And a lot of the clients out there are Chamberlains, not Churchills. So, my personal point of view is the best clients to work with are the ones that either have balls or legs. Get both. And what I mean by that is, you know, I've worked with clients. I remember I was talking to Tony Granger, who I worked with in New York, you know, in 2000. It was the dot-com explosion, and crazy amounts of money being spent, and clients who literally had never done an ad before, and they were like 2 years out of Harvard, and suddenly they had a marketing budget of a couple of $100 million. Great times. So you lost me there for a minute. And they just had these enormous balls because they just, you know, they just were confident. They were like, "Yeah, just make it, do it. You know, if it doesn't work, we'll do something else. Just make it great." And obviously, it's great to work with those clients. And you know, it's hard to find those clients in this climate we're in. Let's face it, we're not in that kind of growth. And at the other end, when I talk about it's clients who are in real trouble. And they kind of, it's almost like a kid that, you know, the kid's like screaming and crying and screaming and crying. And I've got a 5-month-old at home, so screaming and crying. And then finally they just kind of go, "Ugh," and they give up, you know, and they surrender. And I think you get clients that just surrender in a good way and go, okay, talk to me, I want to listen. You know. And it's interesting, one of the clients that we're working with that we literally just won a few months ago in Australia is Qantas. And Qantas, you know, if you're an Australian agency, Qantas is you know, the most iconic client in Australia. But the airline business is just going through this incredibly tumultuous time, and there's just so many massively complicated business pressures on airlines, everything from obviously fuel and unions and all the rest of it. And they've had a shocker of a year. They lost about $450 million last year. And they've got competition they never had before. They were always the national carrier. They just assumed if it was the Australian team, you go with Qantas, now Virgin are coming in. What's really exciting for me is they've got ears. They're like, they spoke to just about every agency in the region. And they ended up choosing us because, I think, because they listened. And that's an exciting place. So it's kind of, for me, you know, when you talk about clients and you talk about great work, as creative people and people that run businesses, I always try and look out for balls or wings. One thought I had, because I didn't want to just get up here and moan and groan, because that would be depressing, is try and have some ideas. One idea that occurred to me is ranking clients. There's this obsession in Australia, and I don't know if it's the same here, with ranking. Like all of the blog sites in Australia and Campaign Group and all those things, they rank the creative directors, the copywriters, the art directors. It's everyone's fucking ranked. It's just constantly, you know. It's like I don't even know. I'm probably 2,000 right now. But it just keeps moving, and it's based on some weird algorithm, and it's based on obviously awards. And it occurred to me that why don't we do that with clients? Because, you know, the most precious thing for us in our business is great clients. We should be doing everything we can to promote them. We should do everything we can to make them bigger and stronger and more proud of what they're doing. And it would be so easy, because if you think about it, if you've got an award editor and you've got all those people on there, you've got the art directors and the copywriters and the directors, and they all get ranked. But why don't you put the marketing people on there? It'd be really interesting to start trying to make heroes of them. And at the end of the year, you know, a client to go, for the last 3 years I've been #1 most creative marketing director, because you know, I've signed up on some of the best work. I think that could be a cool idea. Anyway.
Are you the Judean People's Front? Fuck off. What? Judean People's Front. The People's Front of Judea. Judean People's Front. Come on, wankers. Listen, the only people we ain't more on the road are the fucking Judean People's Front. And the Judean Popular People's Front. Yes. And the People's Front of Judea. The People's Front of Judea. Splitters. We're the People's Front of Judea. Oh, I thought we were the Popular Front. People's Front. Whatever happened to the Popular Front? He's over there.
Can't believe it, though. Can't believe it. Always makes it what's wrong. I guess ugly truth number 2 is there's 2 years, you know. Again, I can't speak for South Africa, but, you know, I mean, South Africa gets compared, especially Capetown gets compared to Sydney for a lot of reasons, but in terms of the beaches and the sunshine, not too bad, but the sunshine and the wine. And a lot of people come to Australia and come into the creative community, not because they want to change the world, not because they want to do the best marketing in the world. They want to come because they want to have a great life, and because their wife wants to, you know, live in Bondi or whatever. And that's fine. The reality is we're just clogged up with creative people in Australia. And, you know, it's a reality. You know, it's funny because I guess 2 things have happened. You know, there's kind of a tsunami because on the one hand, there's less money and there's less business around. And on the other hand, our model has changed. I mean, when we started Droga5, we started with 3 people. And then we were picking up some pretty major business with 20 people. One of the biggest beer brands with about 15 people. Now, 10 years ago, when I was at Saatchi's, that never could have happened. You never would have big major clients walking in small rooms, small tattoo rooms, as they were. Because they go, well, you know, we're a big client, we need a big agency. But clearly the world's changed. I mean, the way that we work at Droga is, when we get into that whole thorny subject of procurement with clients, we meet those wonderful, beautiful people called procurement people. Gorgeous, lovely people. You know, they'll sit down in their crappy nylon suits and they go, well, the other agency has got this many people and the other agency this and your rate card's this and this. You know, what we always say to our clients when we talk to them is, if you work with us, you should expect a lot less people in the room. Because essentially what we try and do is, rather than kind of, you know, have a meeting and push 5 or 6 people in there, ideally we want 1 or 2. But 1 or 2 really senior people who frankly cost as much as the 6 people, but can have a really powerful conversation. And that's worked really well for us. On the back of that, we've picked up some really good business. So, and I don't think we're the only ones doing that. So, it's one of the reasons why it's kind of a bit of a problem, I think, in the creative community, because there's a lot of us. And at the end of the day, you know, that means that creates all sorts of pressure. It creates pressure on clients because they've just got so many conversations. It creates pressure on us as a business because, and I know you guys know, especially I was talking to a photographer last night. It's the same if you're a photographer director. You know a job should cost this. You know it should cost this. But you also know there's someone that's going to do it for a third of the price. And you know that's wrong. You know you don't want to go there. You know if you don't go there, well, he's going to go there. And it's just, you know, it's crazy. You know, for me, a good metaphor is the production industry. You know, when I first came back to Australia about 10 years ago, I was at Saatchi's. The average production budget for TV spot, I'm talking about TV spot, was, I don't know, maybe it was 300,000, something like that, 400,000. Now, if you had a 300,000 budget TV spot, there was kind of a whole bunch of directors that would do that. And if you had something really cool but you only had 50 grand, there was all sorts of really interesting, cool, gifted, amazing young directors where the EPs would go, look, it's a great script, we need to create some noise with this person, we'll do it, we'll back him, we'll do it. And then if you had 700, 800, 1 million, whatever, there was a small group of really, really, really great local directors and some regional directors who can go further afield, who that kind of fell into. And it was a kind of happy medium. It was almost like, if you think of it like, you know, you think of it like a feeding line. The really big fish weren't really interested in the food here. And the really little fish never really got to have the food here. And so there was a kind of détente everyone was fun. What's happening now, and I was talking to someone in the States recently, the same thing's happening there, is the guys in the middle, the good, they're just not getting anything. You know, because we as creative people, there's so few really good scripts around, and so few good opportunities, that if I have something that's got, you know, hardly any money, but it's really cool, the big fish will go, I want to have a go at that. Because I actually haven't done it for 3 months and I want to keep moving and I can do it, it's easy, and I want to do something cool. And equally, the little fish are kind of coming up and going, oh, I want to have a bite of everything. The guys that get really stuck are the ones in the middle, which is, you know, again, you know, it's when I say ugly, I guess it's the inconvenient truth, because I know a lot of those guys in all areas of the industry, and invariably they're some of the nicest guys around. I mean, usually there's a reason why you get to be great. You have to be a certain level of prick often to get there. And, you know, in my case, obviously. And a lot of the guys in the middle are the nice guys. They're just the guys that they're good and they're, you know, they're never going to screw it up and they just don't set the world on fire. And it's really sad because in Australia, there's a lot of them who aren't getting any work. And then you've got this other weird thing happening, which is we're trying to desperately get more young people in, because the really talented young people, you know, you bring them into an agency and they go, well, you know, in general, they go, I could do that, but I could, like, you know, think about starting a blog or creating an online Zoom or whatever it is. And, you know, you're desperately trying to get them in. So there's all these sort of weird things going on. But ultimately, there's too many of them.
Belgian lipstick. Mark your man.
I only see one lipstick in your drawing. Women want colors. Lots and lots of colors. I'm not telling you to listen to anyone, but this is a very fresh approach.
It's okay, Kevin. I don't think there's much else to do here, but call it a day. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Is that all?
You're a non-believer. Why should we waste time on kabuki?
I don't know what that means.
It means that you've already tried your plan and you're number 4. You've enlisted my expertise and you've rejected it to go on the way you've been going. I'm not interested in that. You can understand.
I don't think your 3 months or however many thousands of dollars entitles you to refocus the core of our business.
Listen, every woman wants choices. But in the end, none wants to be one of 100 in a box. She marks her man with her lips. He is her possession. You've given every girl that wears your lipstick the gift of total ownership.
Sit down.
No. Not until I know I'm not wasting my time.
Sit down.
50 years, Don Draper to this. That's progress, eh? It's funny because you look at that and you just go, you know, unbridled arrogance and confidence, and it's like a fairy tale. It's beautiful. And it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're David Droga. It doesn't matter whoever. You get fired out of the room for just having a big read through a client. Or get stuck into their face. You know, you have to use a lot more charm and argument now. And the truth is, and again, the truth is, we've lost our exotic. You know, when I first got into the business, the late 80s, and, you know, it was around some people who were really famous for doing things like that. For just having this, and when I say exotic in the sense that clients were like, I don't know what you do. I don't understand what you do. I just know that what you do is amazing. I hear you the best. I saw this thing you did. And, you know, Bob Isherwood, who, you know, was my boss at the worldwide head of Saatchi's for years. And he worked at some great agencies. He worked at CDP in London, and obviously Saatchi's. And he would tell me these stories, because he's a bit older than me. And he'd tell me these stories about, just like that, where, you know, the client would say, so, Bob, you know, who are we going to use to make this? And you go, I don't know, I haven't thought about it yet. And they're like, fine. And how long is it going to take? Well, I don't know. Well, maybe a month, maybe 3. Fine. And when can we see it? When it's ready. And you know, you can't. And that was the life. And clearly it's moved on. For me, you know, at the end of the day, you know, advertising is really just about people and all those cliches and humanity. And I think it reminds me of politics because, you know, in politics there's always this swing. You know, there's this swing from the pendulum goes from one extreme to another extreme. And if I think about, you know, the 70s, the 60s, you had this political extreme. I mean, I remember being told this great story about Charles Saatchi when he first started the agency. He probably looked not unlike Don Draper. He had his suit on and a cigarette. And he's talking about an idea, and his client sort of puts a hand up and interrupts him and says something about, you know, are you sure it's the right colour? And Charles Saatchi sort of stops the meeting and pulls him over to the window. And downstairs, there's the Saatchi car park, you see. Which one's your car now? And the client says it's the lime green Capri. And he says, well, mine's the silver Aston Martin, so shut the fuck up. And so that was one extreme. And now you get the other extreme, you know, 50 years later, or whatever it is, 40 years later, where, you know, I sit in rooms, I've been in this business 25 years, and I've done some stuff, and you think you deserve a modicum of respect. And I've sit in rooms where there's, you know, there's junior clients just interrupt you, undermine you, question you, and you just, it's amazing. And so to me, you know, that's the extremes, that's the, you know, the two ends of the world. And that's what's happened. And hopefully, and let's face it, like all extremes, both of them are wrong. You know, I mean, it was not a sustainable model for creative people to throw suits, as they were then called, through windows and screw around with clients and the rest of it. It's equally not a sustainable model for clients to totally undermine and disrespect this funny little thing we do called creative, which you can't put in a book, and you can't quantify, and you can't guarantee. We try and focus less on the old-fashioned pulling rabbits out of hats and doing really cool dramatic pitches and, you know, suddenly turning up, you know, dressed as a chicken. And just try and be relevant. I think the worst thing that could possibly happen for an agency is to lose relevance. I mean, I think that's as bad as it gets. And the way you stay relevant is you've got to, like, get under the skin of their business. And, you know, it always astounds me how few creative people these days still are interested in business. I mean, one of the first things I do in the mornings, I go through all the business papers and the business blogs, because either half of my clients are actually in it, or there's stories in there that affect my clients. And that's the conversations we're having with the clients. I'm not going through blogs saying, you know, who's the coolest designer this week. You know, there's people we have in the company that do that, but I think it's really important, if you want to have a human relationship with your clients, you've got to get into the same space they're in.
A, B, C. A, always be B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. Attention, do I have your attention? Interest, are you interested? I know you are, because it's fuck or walk. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision, have you made your decision for Christ? And action. You know what it takes to sell real estate? It takes brass balls to sell real estate. Go and do likewise, gents. The money's out there. You pick it up, it's yours. You don't, I got no sympathy for you. You want to go out on those sits tonight and close? Close, it's yours. Not, you're going to be shining my shoes.
He's like Don Draper's evil. I wanted to talk about, again, something that certainly in the creative world we don't talk about a lot, which is actually selling. It's almost like selling is a dirty word. We're in the business of creating. We're in the business of dreaming stuff up and visualizing stuff and telling stories, but you got to sell stuff, you know. And it's funny, you know, one of the things that David talks about a lot is, with us anyway, it's not a good idea unless you make it. End of story. There's no good having all this piss and wind in the bar, going, oh, it's a great concept, my client won't get up, and it was going to be great, and then the director died. It doesn't matter. If you didn't make it, it didn't happen. It's as simple as that. And as I was saying before, you know, one of the things that's changed radically in the business is the work that really excites me, and the work that a lot of people are getting excited about, is really, really, really hard to sell. It's hard to visualize, it's hard to monetize, it's hard to strategize, it's hard to give that client, who, like I said before, maybe walking out the door for 6 months, maybe shit scared of the CEO, maybe whatever, giving him an argument that he can go and be as brave as you are. And to do that, we have to be like better salesmen than we ever were. You know, I mean, I think it's interesting that if you kind of get to know the people who are running the companies that a lot of us, you know, a lot of people admire, and you talk to those people, they're very good salesmen, you know. And I don't mean salesmen in like a schlocky way. I think that's the problem. When you talk about, you know, I mean, Ogilvy always used to talk about advertising and salesmanship of print. And, you know, Ogilvy famously was a salesman who used to, you know, go around selling Arga cookers door to door. You know, I first started in the business in direct marketing. I first started, you know, at the hard end of selling. A lot of the guys you'll talk to there, they did retail in some way. I mean, ultimately, you've got to be able to make an argument and sell something. I mean, I'm up here, I don't know if I'm winning, but I'm up here trying to sell an argument. And I've had to think about it. I've had to think about the room. I've had to think about the tone. I've had to think about where this little chat's going to start and where it's going to end. And, you know, that isn't just natural. You have to learn that stuff. You know, one of the things that we're doing a lot at Droga5 is actually training our people about selling ideas. Because, you know, we started realizing that we're doing braver and braver work and selling less and less work. And the net result is lots of frustrated people who ultimately lose money because you just churning. You know, it's not a good place. And so rather than what you would normally do, which is you invest more and more money in more creative people and more, we've actually started to spend more and more money on training. And not just boring training, really interesting training. There's the National Theatre Group in Australia is called NIDA. And, you know, there's some theatrics to selling. There's some theatrics to painting pictures. I mean, a lot of the time, we're asking clients to hand over potentially their career if we screw it up, and a lot of money, and we're kind of just painting pictures of going, imagine, you know, Beyonce's going to come on, and then this is going to happen, and 1 billion people will magically this will happen. And, I mean, if you're not good at really defining that, putting some structure around it, you're screwed. They're not going to buy it. So we've got all sorts of interesting people talking to us. We're getting someone in who is the jury psychologist. It's actually a woman who, you know, when they do the whole jury selection, she's the one that actually sits there and goes, that guy is not good, that guy's good. And really understands body language and all sorts of things. So, look, I think it's an interesting space for us to think as a creative company. Don't always think about creating better work, think about selling better work. This is obviously a slightly awkward subject, given that this is an award function that I'm talking about. But I'm kind of talking really broadly as well. I say when the we there isn't necessarily just the advertising industry, I think it's the world. Let me explain. I was really lucky about 7 years ago. I went to a speech in Sydney, and there were some interesting people talking about creativity in a much broader space. There was Bob Geldof, actually Bob Isherwood, who was one of the reasons I was there. And the other guy was Malcolm McLaren, who I didn't really know much about, other than, you know, he was that sort of weird skinny guy with the red hair that started the Sex Pistols. And, you know, all the other speakers were pretty kind of together, they had this kind of going on, and they looked like they'd done it before. And Malcolm McLaren kind of shambolically kind of walked on and, you know, doing this, and was totally all over the place. And he was meant to speak for, like, I think an hour, and he spoke for 2 hours, and he could have spoken all day. He was just one of the most amazing talks as a creative person I've ever heard. And unfortunately, he then died kind of shortly after. And one of the things, I mean, he talks about lots of things. I mean, he's a really interesting guy, because I guess, you know, he's really a social architect. I mean, he did this thing called punk, but he did lots of other things. And he said one of the biggest cliches, in terms of question he got asked when people met him, is like, what's the new punk? What's the new punk? I mean, the punk was, you know, the Sex Pistols in the 70s, what is it now? And he said, there is no new punk. The reason why punk happened is because it was about total shambolic disaster. It was about not caring. It was about failing for no other reason than it was funny and it was interesting. And, you know, from his point of view, he talks a lot in this talk about the culture that we're in right now, and he's talking about the last 20, 30 years, or 20 years, I should say. He said was the most conservative societal culture in hundreds of years. I mean, there's this thing that happens that we all kind of naturally think that our parents were boring and never had sex. Or at least had sex once or twice, but that's you know, but in a very traditional way. And, you know, he was saying that it's kind of interesting if you sort of, you know, in modern history, if you look at, like after the Second World War, you know, obviously amazingly bizarre, terrible things had happened for, you know, almost 5 years. And suddenly the war was over. And people just went crazy. And they were like, look, you know, we've been through genocide, and we've been through all this incredible turmoil, all these people have died. forget about, ethics and morality, like fucking anything I want. I just go crazy. There's orgies happening in Paris, and I was reading a book about this amazing club called Le Bleu Canard, where people would go underground and have sex with ducks, and, incredible. Is this true for you? No, you can only bring them. Anyway, it was a really funky time, and there's a lot of really cool stuff happening with art. There's a lot of because people just didn't care. They were breaking stuff and they were making stuff, and it was all new. And really, from the 90s, a few things happened. AIDS happened. So we're talking about sex. AIDS happened, and suddenly, you fucked around and you could die, and that was a whole new thing. And that sort of created a whole new generation of people who weren't quite the free-spirited people that they used to be. And then you had stuff, the yuppie generation, a lot of money, and for all sorts of reasons, we're more conservative than we've ever been. And you can see it in politics, you can see it in music. Everything gets focus grouped in one way or another. If you're a politician, if you're an architect, if you're a boy band, you're going to get focus grouped in some way. And something he talked about which really stuck in my head, and it explains that bizarre film I just showed you, is he said, look, if we're honest, that the culture we live in now is what he calls the karaoke culture. Because he said, if you think about it, you've got a karaoke. It comes from, obviously, Japan, which is, a fairly narrow culture, and certainly not the kind of culture where you'd expect, things to just blossom. And he said, whenever he was talking, in 2005, he said, you go to Nebraska, there's a karaoke bar. You go to Birmingham, there's a karaoke bar. I guarantee there's probably one here somewhere. He said, it's just this phenomenon that's kind of touched everyone. And he said, the reason is, if you think about it, it's the most perfect kind of thing for our generation, because you can't fail, right? You think about karaoke. You're ugly, you're sweaty, you're untalented, you're rubbish. And you go up on stage and everyone claps. It's like, it's perfect, and he sort of said, it's a great metaphor for us as artistically and creatively. And he actually looked at a lot of the stuff that we think is very cool, whether it be, Damien Hirst, or this or that, or whatever. And he said, everything's derivative. It's interesting, we've been talking a lot in the jury rooms about, has this been done before, or this feels familiar. But he was talking about a really broad culture. That's my daughter, crazy. You better go, How do you have a cold? I brought her all the way to Southafrica. There's a reason why I brought this up, other than I thought I'd get a better reaction. The other thing that he talked about, on the one hand you've got karaoke culture, which is just everyone just not wanting to fail and just not wanting to fuck up and wanting to be just brave enough and just creative enough and not ready to jump off the cliff. He said the only place where there's genuine creativity is the dreams of children. Because children are the only ones that just don't give a fuck. They do stuff. And it was interesting because, as I said, this was about maybe 6-7 years ago he did this talk. And he said, there's this innocence and this vibrancy to what kids are doing because it can't be derivative because everything's new and invented and whatever. And he said, but even culture's grabbing it. And he was showing on this Louis Vuitton luggage that suddenly, remember when Louis Vuitton started scrawling the kids' stuff and everything, and he showed more and more fashion stuff. And he said, even the fashion world, which is the first to jump on stuff, is starting to pull that kids thing. I think there's something really interesting that happens with your lifespan. I mean, there's this kind of Buddhist thing about, you sort of start with a child and you end a child. I was, another thing that really affected me, probably again about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I was at Cannes, and when I was at Saatchi's, and we had a very good year actually. But I remember just not feeling that good. It's like, trying to win Cannes is a bit like painting the Harbour Bridge. You win it and you go, fuck it, I'll start again. I'm sure you know what I mean. And it's kind of like Chinese food. I mean, you eat it and it's great, and you're hungry again. And I just felt really kind of like, oh great, we've got 6 lines. Oh fuck, I've got to do it again. Now I've got to get to 7 lines and then 8 lines. And my wife and I went to Barcelona because it's obviously a long trip over, and we thought we'll go to Barcelona. And we went to Juan Miro's gallery. So Miro, if you know the artist Miro, pretty amazing artist. he had a gallery up on the hill above Barcelona, and they turned it into his gallery, where it used to be a studio. And they were doing a retrospective, and it was kind of really, I found it really interesting because it was all done in chronological order. So it was a bit like the Guggenheim. So kind of, you started in the middle and then kind of worked your way around and around. And it was beautiful, outdoor, indoor. So it started off with the very first pictures that Miro did when he was like, I don't know, when he was 2 or 3. And they were really interesting. And you could see the DNA. It hadn't really become the Miro that we know, but there's some kind of interesting stuff there. And then it moves into when he went to school, and suddenly it's all boring. Because when he got to school, obviously people said, well, that's shit, you can't do that. You've got to draw plants and vases and nudes and things. So he did that, and then you're walking through this thing, and for about 10 years he goes to art, he just becomes really, he can draw, and it's kind of boring. And then you see, it wasn't until he's in his 20s, he started kind of getting it, going, oh, fine, go back to this thing. And then he started getting his confidence in his 30s, and he's one of those artists that actually, in his lifetime, became collective. So then he got real confidence, he started smashing this thing all over the place. So in his 30s, he was doing the kind of work that we know. And then in his, probably totally lying here, but I think probably his 40s or 50s, something like that, he got bored. And he went, look, I keep going, big white piece of paper, and yellow there, and black there, and 2,000 frames, And so he started playing with different medium. And as you go around the gallery, he started doing really cool things in ceramics, and really cool things in he did some amazing textiles, where you could see his style, but he was pushing it into different medium. Which again, if you think about what we're doing, you can see the analogy. And then he kind of gets older and older, and he keeps doing this and I'm walking around this gallery, and he thinks, I fucking died. He lived for a long time. And finally, you get to the last floor, and he's like, I think he's like 85, he died when he was like 95, 97. And the work is amazing. It's got nothing to do with anything you've seen for the last 7 years of his life. It's like he suddenly went, fuck it, I'm going to die. Just go for it, And he started inventing all this stuff, and it was awesome. He was I actually didn't like it. I didn't get it. But it was so bold and so different and so not what the journey had been on. Anyway, it kind of affected me, because I thought there's something very cool about that. That really, you could see the effect of the karaoke culture. You could see when people were starting telling him what to do and telling him what was good. And really, he was at his most powerful at the 2 times where he just said, I'm going to jump off the cliff. And it kind of goes back to the whole punk thing. That's what it was about. So I guess, the idea behind that for me is celebrate grand failure. Not surprisingly, when I talk to clients about, we need to celebrate grand failure, often the room goes very quiet. But I think, there's a difference between failure and grand failure. And if you really understand grand failure, it's about learning. It's about pushing things and breaking things. And one of the things that I've kind of pushed a lot of our clients into is creating what I call a financial sandpit, right? So we all know, we don't want to do scams, we don't want all that crap. But what we do want to do is really work with our clients and try things around. And, I've got some clients that have had a really good year, and I've said, why don't you just put $100,000 in your sandpit? And let's all play with it. And it's not just an agency thing, it's that your own people know that sandpit's there. And they can go, there's this idea, and it doesn't really fit into my job description, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And the point of that sandpit is, and it could be $5,000, it could be $5, it doesn't matter what it is, but the point is it's real. And it's about playing, I'm going to show you something. I've been rattling on much longer than the other guys, sorry about that. I'm going to show you something. I had a one of my clients is Unilever, and, which is a big bold company. And I was talking to the guy who runs Unilever there last Christmas, and we were having a rather long lunch. And he was sort of saying, and he was quite new in the company in terms of coming over to Australia. He said, look, I want to inspire my people, and, it's like a lot of what we do obviously has to fall into, some global, architecture and blah, 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 blah. And I said, why don't you just give us some money and let us do something? Let's see what we use over lunch. And he said, like what? I said, well, what's your toughest client? What's the client that you don't do no one in your entire Unilever group in Australia goes, hey, that's the cool one to work on. Because we work on links, which is kind of cool, we're doing Sunsilk, we're doing a few different things. And he thought about it, he said, well, Domestos toilet cleaner. I said, okay. I said, well, look, why don't you give me, and he ended up giving me, I started with a very small amount of money, and he made it smaller, so thanks for that. But the sandpit was working. Anyway, he gave me my sandpit, but the part of the deal with the sandpit was I said, okay, the only way you can get the sandpit to work is I've got to excite some directors and people. They're going to have to go, is the client going to mess about with this? No, we're going to go for it, we're going to do it. And the other part of the agreement was it had to run. And ironically, the thing I'm going to show you ended up flighting twice on Australia's Got Talent, which is one of the biggest shows in Australia, and probably the last place a media person would ever put this, but it had a kind of profound effect because it was so kind of strange. Anyway, this is what we did with Sam.
My name is Camilla, and in September this year, I will marry my fiancé Phil. When we first got together, he mentioned that it was a hobby of his. It's not as easy as it looks. A lot of money and more effort goes into it, and a lot of food. When he competed his first time round, he came second. He's determined to get that first place now. There are a few bodybuilders that do work, but the majority of them are usually just all about the...
There's something wrong with the film. It's not meant to be in slow motion, so I'll save you 10 minutes of watching it in slow motion. Basically, it's a 2-minute film about this bodybuilder that, seeing through his long-suffering girlfriend, who just eats huge amounts of food for the show. And you just assume he eats a documentary on bodybuilder, and at the end, you see him in the toilet and he shits a lot. And she says, she gets the Domestos out and she says, well, Phil's strong, but this is stronger. You know. So it's on YouTube. If you want to see it, it's on YouTube. If you want to see it, it's on YouTube. But it was amazing because they put it on and, you know, it got about 800,000 hits, and they connected it to their sales page, and the company were like, wow, you know, and they never would have done it in 1,000 years. And to be honest, they're probably never going to do it again. But it started to get the blood pumping, and people within the company started going, well, hang on, that was the brand that you can do it on, and maybe my brand. So I think that's kind of quite inspiring, you know, from a big client point of view. Okay, I'm almost finished. So I thought I should end on a high note, because I've been going on about how, you know, God awful industries. One of the things that I am really excited about is that I do really love the creative community, and something that I talk a little bit about with friends is I don't think I like the advertising industry, to be honest. I think I like the people in it, which is kind of unless you really understand, maybe it doesn't make sense, but like when you talk to people in advertising, they're really generally interesting people. They tend to be more socially aware. Their politics are kind of cooler. They tend just to be, you know, drink a lot more. And they're really cool people, you know, compared to people that if I was in the banking industry or some other industry. It's almost like when it becomes a thing, when it becomes a body, it's like, you know, it's not always as nice. I mean, there's a thing going on in Australia that's been going on for a while now, and we've got this, you know, blog in Australia. And the guy who runs the blog is one of my closest friends. It's a little awkward, but it's the only thing that we really don't agree on. We started it about 8 years ago. And it's just an opportunity for anyone with an axe to grind to just pull down wood. So, for example, that goes on the blog and it's anonymous, total rubbish, anonymous, fucking crap, bin dummy, you know, there's 200 things telling me how shit it is. Which doesn't really bother me because I've got skin like a rhino, but if you're a young kid in the industry, it really affects you, and I think it really goes against everything I've been talking about, because at a time when we should be braver, and a time when we should be working together more collaboratively and lifting each other up and actually going, you know what, so-and-so did something, it failed, but it failed really heroically. I think good on them for trying to do something different. We're all collectively going, shit, fail, it's just really, it's really crap. And you don't see it in a lot of the other creative industries. You don't see it in fashion and the other industries. But in advertising, it's become really bitchy. So something I started last year was something, you know, that hopefully, for me, was kind of a bit of an antidote. I'll play the film and get up. I'm doing this to me. There we go. Such a beautiful film. It's about a handicap, though. It's playing it really is. I wouldn't just say that. Is it going to happen? Do you want me to just tap dance for how long do I have to tap dance? 1 minute? A minute of tap dancing. I can tell a joke about you. Baldy. IT people always do this. Well, I'll give you a bit of background. About when we started the company 4.5 years ago, one of the good things about starting your own company is you can kind of do anything you want, you know, and you can decide the walls are going to be red or blue or whatever you want to do. And one of the things that I said I wanted to do was to hire someone who's mentally handicapped, because I've got people in my family, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it would be a good thing to do. So we actually got this kid in through a company called Breakthrough in Australia that specialises in putting not just the mentally handicapped or intellectually handicapped, I think it's the proper word, but physically handicapped people into jobs. The thing is, they don't put them into credit companies, because credit companies just never think of hiring them. They put them into big, awful banks and big corporates, because they're the companies that they have this kind of, the board says we should have 2%, you know, handicapped people, 3% Aboriginal people, and all sorts of weird stuff like that. So we brought him into a great company. It was transformational for us and for him. If Baldy over there hurries up, well, I'm not joking. Now I was joking. My glasses. Not completely. You know it was on, you know the other version yesterday?
It's estimated that there's over 1 million people with disabilities looking for work now. And, you know, the impact of being unemployed and having a disability can lead to some pretty catastrophic feelings of rejection, of feeling inadequate, and just devastates a person's self-esteem.
Lloyd has Down syndrome, and I knew life was going to be hard for him. It's so important for people with disabilities to be given a chance to have that self-respect and dignity that comes with knowing that you've got a place in the world. A creative company is just a perfect place for someone with an intellectual disability.
Part of what we're trying to do with Creative Spirit is to actually force the agenda.
The best advocates for the employment of people with disabilities are companies that have actually employed people with disabilities.
Breakthrough first came in here, they looked around and they said, do you know how rare it is that we get to bring people like Lloyd into environments like this?
When I first heard about this project, I just thought it was a no-brainer. It is something I haven't thought about, because I have relatives that have disabilities, and I know some of the challenges they face trying to be accepted into the workforce. But I also know that once they are accepted into their roles, they generally excel.
It's a very cool idea, and quite frankly, we couldn't think of a good reason to say no.
I like the creative community. I mean, as much as it drives me fucking batshit on a regular basis, just like everyone else, I don't want to be in another community. I want to be in this community.
disabilities who want to work, they deserve this chance to show what they can do.
It just fits. You should do it. There was just one more slide, and all it was just, you got it? Okay, look, it's interesting because I know a lot of South African guys before I came here, and I've been having a lot more discussions with guys over from the jury. But this is a country that, I guess, more than any other country in the world, is constantly being shaped and evolved by diversity. And I know there's all sorts of debates going on, even now, in terms of employment and all sorts of stuff. But it seems to me this would be a really good thing for someone here to pick up. And the exciting thing for me is, we didn't do it for any other reason than we were doing it anyway. And people came in the office and they were like, "How do you do it?" And I said, "It's really simple. I mean, there's all sorts of, it's not hard." And so we've got 50 companies in Australia that signed up. And all we ask people to sign up to do is to take a handicapped person on trial, and the whole thing is subsidised, and the kids that come in, or they're not kids, Lloyd's like 28, they have a lot of support around them, so it's not like suddenly weird things happen. And it's been picked up around the world. So in London, it's about to launch in the next month. It's already launched in New Zealand. We're launching in the States. So if there's anyone here collectively, and by the way, the other thing I think is really cool with Credit Spirit, it's not about an agency. One of the only rule I made about Credit Spirit is you're not allowed to enter any rules, but you turn it into something. It's about what it is. So if there's media companies and credit companies that want to do this, then I think it'd be great if you did. And that's the person who's also she organises it. Okay, thanks everyone.